Okay, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today on BD TV. I'm Caitlin, and I'm a senior executive at the BD consultancy. For those of you who were expecting Peter, I'm really sorry to disappoint, but unfortunately, he's been feeling unwell and has just received a positive COVID test. So he's resting at home with his family. Don't worry though, I won't subject you to my attempt at an Irish accent. And this will take the usual shape it does of a short informal conversation followed by a Q&A. So if you do have any questions, please do use the Q&A function that should appear at the bottom of your screens, and we can look at those later on in the session. So let me introduce you to today's speaker. We have with us Abby Winkworth, who is a partner at JMW Solicitors. Abby previously worked at Deloitte. Followed by that, she was at IBB Solicitors for 12 years. I've only recently had the pleasure of meeting Abby properly, but I know that she's been a hugely fantastic and valuable client and advisor to us throughout the years since we started. I hope that's a fair introduction, Abby, and that I pronounced your name correctly. Would you be happy just to share a little more about yourself and your current role?
Yes, so a little bit more. Well, let me just explain who JMW Solicitors are and talk a little bit about that. So, because some people won't necessarily have heard of us. So, we originate in the Spitalfields area of Manchester, and in 2019-20 turned over just under £46 million, which put us in the top 75 UK law firms, according to the lawyer. What I'm most proud about is that JMW is an accredited investor in people, and that we're ranked 33 in the Sunday Times Best Companies to Work For, which is something I've always wanted to be part of the law firm that was doing that. So that's fantastic. Yeah. The London office was opened by Lee Adams in March 2018 as a service office for the JMW clients who were London-based, but it's grown very quickly. And in the first year, we turned over £5.1 million. And in this year's COVID adjusted target, we're hoping to turn over about £10 million, and we're on track to do that. There are 30 fixed share partners in London, including me, and we've both got both business to consumer and business to business service line. So my job title at the firm is simply partner. I'm a fixed share partner, as I was at my previous firm. At my previous firm, marketing and business development heavy, worked a lot on strategy, sat by invitation on the board for most of the time that I was there. And at JMW, I've only really got two objectives. One, which is to support the growth of the London office. And the other one is to champion and develop a program called Law Share, which is a profit sharing referral membership, which turns over about £2.5 million and has about 500 members.
Wow, certainly sounds impressive. So I understand that you're fairly new to the firm, which I think is something that our listeners will probably be very interested in. The fact that you moved from a senior position to another senior position during a worldwide pandemic. How have you found that transition during this time? How did that work practically for you?
Oh, well, I mean, I would have preferred not to have made the move in the middle of a pandemic. It has its challenges in terms of onboarding and getting up to speed with your new colleagues and the people who are going to help you do your job. So earlier this week, I was looking at Bruce Tuckman's model of how teams are created. You might know it. It's that forming, storming, norming, and performing model that everybody talks about. What was interesting is there's a fifth stage that he had added sometime in the 1970s, which is called adjourning. and is often referred to as being in mourning. And that talks about when you finished a project and the team members feel that sense of loss and a desire to move on and recreate those great feelings with others, which is probably best describes the relationship that I was having with my former firm by the beginning of July this year. It was time to move on, and there was a real sense of not wanting to, and a real sense of if it just not fitting anymore, it wasn't a good place to be in. No fault of theirs, no fault of mine, not a good place. So I needed to move on. And my experience of this is that I really only have one asset to my name that counts for anything. And as much as I would like to say it is my youth, good looks, charm, brains, wit, and encyclopedic experience and knowledge of professional services management. And I think I am great in all of those areas. But actually, I only have one asset that really counts, and that, as it turned out, was my friends. So one day, in a fit of I made a list of all of my friends, and I started to ask them. I rang them up. I emailed, "Can I talk to you? I want to talk to you." And I said, "What should I do? Where should I look?
Yeah.
Who should I speak to?" And they're incredibly generous. People are incredibly generous with their time, and they listened, and they gave me the benefit of their time and of their opinion and their contacts. And if there's anybody on this Zoom who is my friend, and I imagine that quite a few of you are, you may wonder why I didn't call you. Well, you were on my list, and I was going to get around to calling you. But it was probably the first or second call that I made that resulted in someone reminding me that I knew Joy Kingsley, formerly of Pannoni, now senior partner of JMW. They made an offer to reconnect me, to say hello, and that led 48 hours later to a very early morning Zoom chat, followed by 4 Zoom interviews, all on the same day. And the next morning, I woke up to an email which had a partner deed in it and my name on the top.
Amazing. Wow.
Extraordinary.
Yeah, especially during this time. But it's lovely to hear that the root of that was friends and friendship. Especially,
completely. Yeah. I mean, the speed that it all happened in was extraordinary, and compelling. The simplicity of the process kind of showed to me the way in which JMW was going to work, and the fact that they could bring so many busy partners together with 4 hours notice was a better indication than anything that they could say about how important this investment was. But what I would say, what I found extraordinary, which I shouldn't, and it was humbling, but not in that kind of like, I was really humbled, I've got shed loads of money and I can have a party, humbling, that whatever it is. It was really humbling was that I did have friends. And what I would say to anybody who's in a job that they don't like, or not in a job, or just not feeling great, is email somebody and say, "Have you got 10 minutes for a chat?" Email me and say, "Have you got 10 minutes for a chat?" Because I owe some people that generosity of time. And I want to, and I'm very, and we all need to pay it forward, because that saying, be kind to people on the way up because you might need them on the way down. Well, just keep on being kind to the people throughout your career, because they'll pay you back in spades.
Yeah, well, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. So I suppose, like most of us, you've been obviously working from home a lot more than the office recently. but I believe you've recently opened or set up an office in London.
Yeah.
What was it that attracted your firm to the London market, especially because it's such a saturated market for firms?
Well, I think the saturation point really doesn't enter into it, because I've been thinking about this, and a friend of mine who's a consultant that we used to use in my previous firm put it really very simply, which is law firms are like coffee shops. And the idea is that you open your shop, you sell coffee until you've filled all of the seats. And if you want to make more revenue and more profit, then you need to sell people a sandwich and a cake and increase your spend per person. But eventually, if you're ambitious, you run out of seats and you'll need to open another shop. And whilst it is tempting, and I have seen this a lot, whilst it is tempting to open one close by you so you can make it into a mini me and keep control of it, the most effective way to expand is to find the next best market that you could possibly be in, the next best high street that you could possibly be in, if we're using a coffee analogy. And in this case, the best legal market in the UK is London, and that's where we set up our coffee shop.
Yeah.
And then the temptation is to start small, hedge your bets, stick your toe in the water, buy cheap seats and lower quality coffee, microwave the panini, which makes no sense whatsoever when you're competing against the biggest brands to win some of the most exciting work in the world, from the most sophisticated purchasers around. So JMW has a really clear objective, which is to take JMW into the heart of the City of London and succeed. And that it's saturated is neither here nor there.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. I really want a coffee now you've said that. So I suppose that links then to the idea of hybrid working that's obviously become more popular recently. And I know that a lot of firms and people within the firms have had concerns about their partners adapting to that style. Do you think that changing the London regional divide is going to impact the way that works? What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, this is a really interesting question. So I don't think there's really going to be a seismic change. JMW, and this is partly probably because my experience of JMW, my JMW have sort of bucked the trend by keeping the flow towards working from the office and working from home, not flowing towards working from home and by exception going into the office.
Yeah,
I think that I've seen more recently, as this has gone on, that the longer term effects on well-being, access to quality resources, progression, etc., has proven the obvious to me, which is that humans like to gather together. And if we didn't have towns as a race, we'd have made towns. And if we didn't have markets as a race, we'd have made markets, because that's what we're like to do. I think it's great that we're entering a post-industrial age, and much of the leader dogma about working from home has been shown to be, not of no importance whatever. Yeah. But I do think that whilst technology is an enabler, it's like any other tool, and it works best when it's pulling people together. So I believe there'll always be a flow of business towards the big central hubs and markets. I hope that Manchester's a brilliant city. I'd like the northern powerhouses to be stronger. So from that perspective, those regions to be stronger. But I think there'll always be that draw into working in an office and working in a city.
Yeah, sure. So I suppose that links to the subject of achieving your plans both your own plans and as a firm during a no contact period. How or what are you doing to ensure that you're able to do that practically?
So I've become pretty agnostic about Zoom, phone, person. They're all channels of communications, and as communication experts, and I'm sure many of the people on the phone are communication experts, that not having the obvious communication channels open to you cannot be a reason for not doing something, because the key is in the name. We're communications people. So when you can only see a maximum of about, 15% of the office at any one time, and you can't meet everyone, then my job has just been to overcome those barriers by talking to people in person if possible, setting up Zooms, being on phones, not letting the tech rule me, use it the way I want to use it. A recent article I was reading was about how people face to face, when they're talking, their pupils mirror each other in size.
Oh, wow.
It's part of all of those tiny little biological, chemical things that are happening between us humans, which make information flow.
Yeah.
And it's really difficult to do this on Zoom.
Yeah.
And it's about that close. And when you're that close, it's like that Alas, Smith and Jones scene where people are, you're like that. I mean, it's really aggressive sort of, and so it's really difficult. So I think that for me, it's all about choosing the channel that suits the person you're speaking to and the situation you're in. And I love a phone. I love a phone because when my sons, are giving me a bit of whatever as teenagers, I love going for a walk with them, because we're walking side by side. We're not making eye contact, and we can talk about anything.
Yeah.
So the phone in some ways is actually better for communication than face-to-face, because we're used to doing this. We're used to having this thing in our ear here. We're not so used to that.
Yeah. That's interesting.
So I've changed most of the meetings that we have at JMW London, not for the purposes of technology, but because I think it's important, to lots and lots of breakouts. But that's not because there's issues with the technology. That's because as a firm, we've grown so fast that in a year, we've gone from 5 people to 85 people. And we need to keep those small little groups together that like to talk to each other. So technology allows us to do that, actually incredibly effective. I don't have to hire 10 rooms. I can just put people in a room on Zoom and get them to do it. So it's using the tech to enable communication.
Yeah, sure. Okay, I'm conscious that we only have a couple of minutes left, so I'm just going to load the poll up now. So this is looking ahead a bit more at in terms of business growth and whether we think the pandemic will accelerate the growth of firms. So I'll just give people a moment to have a say and vote for that. And then, if you wouldn't mind, Abby, just providing your perspective, what would you go for out of those 3?
Will the pandemic accelerate the growth of strong regional firms?
So it looks like we've got a fairly clear winner at the moment.
What's a fairly clear winner?
So at the moment, most people are voting for yes. As proximity becomes less important, they think it will accelerate the growth. So is that in line with what you think?
I'm not convinced that it's a working. I don't think it's an agile working issue. I think it is probably driven by client and client value and clients wanting to have people closer to them.
Yeah.
This kind of one of your other people was talking about, globalization versus regionalization, and there is definitely a sense that people want to be supported local and want to be local. The global show seems to have run its course. But I still think that people need to be wary of thinking that they don't need to be in the market.
Okay.
I think to do that is to the detriment of themselves and their long-term prospects, but also their clients and their firms. I think we need to keep an open mind as to how we will run our businesses in the future.
Sure. Yeah, that's great. Okay, and just very quickly before we end, in true BD TV style, what are you looking forward to most at the end of the lockdown?
Oh my Lord. So my son's autistic, and for many people like him and people who are socially or other introverted, this hasn't been the worst thing ever to have a low sensitive, low, sensory world for a while. But I also know that a lot of people are suffering hugely and well-being wise. So what I am looking forward to is I'm looking forward to people generally being happier and calmer and less anxious and less fearful for their jobs and their families and their own health. And I'm looking forward to hugging them most.
Yeah, that's lovely. Well, thank you very much, Abby. That was really great. And I'm sure that everyone will have found that really interesting. So thank you so much for your time. And I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you. No, thank you very much. You're much better than Peter.
Thank you. Thanks for saying that. Speak soon. Bye.